Welcome to the Rickonomics Brief. Today's title is The Future of Cocaine Legalization in Colombia, brought to you by the Institution of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. I'm your host, Rick Alonso, also known as Rickonomics. Disclaimer. This is an unclassified brief for educational purposes only. This episode discusses drug policy, organized crime, legal markets, rural economics, and investor risk. This is not legal, investment, or advocacy for illegal activity. The purpose is to assess why cocaine legalization in Colombia remains unlikely, what would have to align for the legal market to function, why investors should separate political rhetoric from executable market realities. This episode is adapted from the Institution of the Americas report, The Future of Cocaine Legalization in Colombia, Economic, Political, and Global Implications. Bottom line up front. Executive summary. Full cocaine legalization in Colombia remains unlikely. The idea gained attention during President Gustavo Petro's term because his administration openly criticized the U.S.-led war on drugs and entertained the possibility of bringing cocaine production under government regulation. That created market interest, especially among some agricultural investors and actors looking for early exposure to a possible legal coca economy. But the report was written to slow that thinking down. Political discussion is not the same as investable realities. A legal cocaine framework would require territorial control, licensing, enforcement, regulatory capacity, international acceptance, and protection from cartel infiltration. Those conditions are not currently aligned. The more probable path is a gradual expansion of legal coca-leaf markets for non-narcotic production, not a full-scale legal cocaine industry. Now let's get into it. So, welcome to the Rickonomics Brief, brought to you by the Institution of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. I am Rick Alonso. Today's brief looks at Colombia, coca policy, and the difference between political rhetoric and investable realities. This report was originally developed during President Gustavo Petro's term, when his administration was openly challenging the traditional war on drugs framework and entertaining the idea of legalizing cocaine in some form of government regulation. The argument was that the regulation could weaken illegal trafficking networks, reduce violence, and give rural coca farmers a path to a formal economy. This idea attracted attention. It also attracted speculation. Some agricultural investors and market participants began to look at the possibility of legal coca or cocaine-related opportunities, as if the policy shift were closer than it actually was. That was the real reason for the reports and why I did this deep dive. The concern was not that people were asking questions. The concern was that some were acting on FOMO, the fear of missing out, rather than testing the full set of conditions that would have to exist before this became a market reality or real in any sense of the framework. A legal coca or cocaine framework would not depend on one speech or one president or one policy proposal. It would require a long chain of alignments. The Colombian state would need to control production areas, regulate growers, secure transports, prevent diversion, resist cartel infiltration, and manage international pressure, and create enough trust for farmers and companies to participate legally. That is a very tall order. The original report was written to map that reality. It was designed to show what would have to happen, which entities would become relevant, which regulatory arm would matter, and what ripple effects could appear in secondary economies if Colombia ever moved closer to this policy path. The goal was not to predict legalization. The goal was to separate the signal from the speculation. Sorry, that rhymed. Why the legalization discussion gained attention. Colombia has lived with the economic and security costs of cocaine production for decades. In many rural areas, coca remains one of the few crops that reliably connects the farmers to income. Armed groups and trafficking networks exploit that reality. The state has tried eradication, enforcement, and security cooperation, but the economic incentive behind coca has not disappeared. Petro's critique on the war on drugs created a space for different conversation. Supporters of the reform that argue a regulated market could reduce cartel power, protect farmers, and shift part of the coca economy into legal channels. The argument does have its logic, but logic alone does not create feasibility. A legal market only works if the state can govern it. And that is the central core issue. If Colombia cannot control who grows or who produces, who transports, who sells, then legalization could create a hybrid market. Legal and illegal activity would operate side by side. Criminal organizations could use legal structures as cover while continuing to supply illegal exports to markets. That would not weaken the system. It would just make it harder to see. So, why full legalization remains unlikely? Full cocaine legalization faces several hard barriers. First is the territorial control. Many coca-producing regions remain influenced or contested by criminal groups, armed actors, and trafficking networks. A legal market cannot function if the state cannot enforce the rules in the places where the production happens. The second barrier is a regulatory speed. Coca can be grown and processed faster than governments can build a serious control system. If production expands faster than licensing, tracking, and enforcement, excess supply could leak into illegal channels. That is one of the main risks. A weak legal framework could create more product, more confusion, and more opportunity for diversion. The third barrier is international pressure. Colombia's drug policy does not exist in isolation. The United States has long been central to Colombia's counter-narcotics funding, security cooperation, and diplomatic environments. A full legal cocaine market would directly challenge that relationship. Even if some countries are more open to harm reduction, legal change inside Colombia would not automatically create export markets. Banking, shipping, and corporate participation, along with international approvals, would remain major constraints. That limits how far the policy can go. Cartels would not disappear. One of the weaker assumptions behind legalization talk is that regulation would automatically weaken criminal groups. It may reduce some illegal profit under the right conditions, but it could also force criminal groups to adapt. Cartels and armed groups could try to enter the legal market through front companies. They could pressure legal producers. They could corrupt licensing systems, and they can continue serving countries where cocaine remains illegal. This matters because legalization does not remove the profit motive. It changes the terrain where the profit is contested. Mexican cartels will also have a stake in this shift. Groups like the Sinaloa and the Nueva Generación, New Generation cartel, have long relied on the Colombian supply chains. If Colombia moved toward regulation, those organizations could look for ways to protect routes, influence producers, or shift more aggressively into other drug markets. That means legalization would not end the conflict all on its own. It would change the structure of its competition. The more probable path: legal coca, not legal cocaine. The more realistic path is not full cocaine legalization. It is the gradual expansion of legal coca-leaf production for non-narcotic uses. That distinction matters. Coca-leaf can be used in traditional, cultural, and commercial products without creating a legal cocaine industry. Colombia could explore tightly regulated markets for coca-based teas, wellness goods, flavoring, research, and other controlled uses. Bolivia offers a partial model through regulated coca for traditional use. It is not a perfect comparison, but it shows that legal coca markets can exist under limits. The Coca-Cola Company example shows that coca can exist inside a tightly controlled legal supply chain. Coca-Cola does not directly produce coca leaves. A licensed company, the Stephan Company, spelled Stepan, in New Jersey, handles the decoconized coca leaf extract under U.S. government oversight. That example does not mean Colombia can quickly enter that market. It just means that there's a highly narrow precedence. For Colombia, this type of legal coca pathway would be slower, more limited, and more plausible than a full legal cocaine industry. It would also require international agreements, strict licensing, and strong oversight, but it will avoid most of the difficult barriers attached to cocaine itself. Why investors need discipline. This is where the investor issue matters. If someone hears a president discuss legalization and immediately treats it as if it's an investable trend, then they're skipping the hardest part of the analysis. A real market would require more than political interest. It would require laws, enforcement, licenses, regulators, compliant companies, secure supply chains, banking access, and international acceptance. Without those pieces, the opportunity remains speculative. You can almost apply this to any form of product legalization or incentives announced by governments. That was the purpose of the original report. It was not to encourage investment into the legalization thesis. It was written to show how many conditions would have to be aligned before the thesis can become executable. Investors needed to see the full map, the possible first movers, the likely blockers, the regulatory choke points, and the secondary industries that could be affected. The value was not in assuming the legalization would happen. The value was knowing what to watch out for if the environment began to make the right moves. Who would resist? A legal coca market would create winners and losers. Farmers can benefit if the system gave them legal income, protection, and access to formal markets. But criminal groups would resist losing control. Some industries could also resist if coca-based products threatened existing commercial interests. The coffee sector may view coca expansion as a threat if profitable coca draws land, labor, and attention away from coffee production. This is why the issue is not only drug policy. It also has land, labor regulation, market access, and political power that makes the implementation difficult. What would Colombia need? If Colombia pursued even a limited legal coca market, the first requirement would be state capacity. The government would need licensing, production limits, secure transport, and a way to verify that legal coca does not leak into the illegal cocaine production. But regulation on paper is not enough. Farmers would need to trust the legal system more than the illegal buyer. Communities would need protection from armed groups. Regulators would need enough integrity to resist corruption. International partners would need enough confidence to tolerate the model. That would be the real test. A legal market can only function if the state can govern the market after it begins. Analysts comment. The debate over cocaine legalization in Colombia often moves faster than the reality on the ground. The strongest assessment is that full cocaine legalization remains unlikely. The barriers are too large, the criminal control, weak enforcement capacity, and international pressure, along with resistance from powerful interests, to say the least. The more probable future is narrower. Colombia may gradually expand legal coca markets for non-narcotic products. That path would still be difficult, but it would be more than feasible than building a full legal cocaine industry. The mistake is to treat legalization as an on and off switch. It's not. It's an entire system. If Colombia cannot control licensing, territory, transport, and criminal infiltration, legalization could strengthen the same networks it's supposed to weaken. The main question is not whether Colombia can legalize. The question is whether Colombia can govern the market after legalization begins. A note on the full report. The full report detailed is available at institutionoftheamericas.com/reports, as well as my Substack and Patreon with the handle Rickonomics. That report includes the broader breakdown of entities, corporations, regulatory bodies, and market actors that could become relevant if Colombia ever moves closer to legal coca or cocaine framework. For investors and analysts, the value is not assuming legalization will happen. The value is knowing which companies, agencies, and regulatory channels would begin to move once the policy changes, or if it ever does change. So that's why the full report tracks these actors and narrows down what you need to keep an eye on. 3 things close. Condition. Full cocaine legalization in Colombia remains unlikely. A limited legal coca market is more probable. Next action. Separate the political rhetoric from executable market reality. Watch the state capacity, licensing, enforcement, farmer protection, and anti-diversion controls before treating the issue as investable or actionable. Owner. Colombian policymakers, rural development agencies, law enforcement, regulators, international partners, investors, and analysts tracking policy-sensitive market shifts. In closing, this has been the Rickonomics Brief, brought to you by the Institution of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. I am Rick Alonzo. The future of coca policy in Colombia will not be decided by theory alone. It will be decided by control, enforcement, incentives, and trust. A legal market can only work if the state can govern it. The full report is available on the institutionoftheamericas.com/reports, as well as on my Substack and Patreon with my handle, Rickonomics, where I provide the expanded list of entities, corporations, and regulatory arms to watch if this issue ever moves closer to reality. Until my next brief, may wisdom guide your decisions, may faith steady your steps, and may peace be with you.